Well, you didn't get him to sleep, but you'll get another chance in a few minutes. A minister by the name of Perry tells about his 3-year-old daughter, Betsy. At the end of October, she went trick-or-treating for the very first time. He writes, "My wife had worked hard sewing a cute ladybug costume Betsy had picked out of a pattern book. As the holiday approached, however, Betsy decided she'd rather be a vampire. Where she discovered vampires, I do not know. Her mother and I bargained with her, and she finally agreed to be a ladybug this year and a vampire next year. A few weeks after Halloween, the Sunday school class met for rehearsal for the annual Christmas pageant, and Betsy's teacher told her class that all the boys would be shepherds and all the girls would be angels. The teacher was perplexed when Betsy burst into tears and ran from the room, searching for her pastor father. When she found me, she sniffled through her tears. My teacher says I'm going to be a Christmas angel in the pageant. I asked what was wrong with being an angel. She said, I don't want to be a Christmas angel, Daddy. I want to be a Christmas vampire. Angel, vampire, pretty well sums up the child, doesn't it? Delight and trouble, cause for joy and such worry. And if ever that child is front and center, of course, it is the Christmas season. The story is about the child, and therefore, in a way, about all children. The story reminds us that here's where it begins for all of us. No matter the other great challenges and concerns, hopes and worries that clutter the headlines, that demand our attention as adults each day, the heart of our life and the hope of our future rests in the child. And the question they asked a long time ago. Luke begins his account of the birth of Jesus with the story of the birth of John, who will become the baptizer. And it reads, fear came over all their neighbors, and all these things were talked about through the entire hill country, and all who heard about this birth pondered them and said, what will become of this child? 100 million of them born every year. African hut, crowded Shanghai, busy Manhattan, lonely Montana. And what happens to them, whether they grow healthy and strong to become mature, contributing, caring human beings, will affect not only those closest to them, but every one of us, our economy, our enjoyment of life, our safety, our social security, no less. Astounding that little one must learn how to walk upright and speak a foreign language, keep dirt out of the mouth and the diaper dry, and manipulate those 3 instruments of the civilized table, keep his food above the floor, sleep in the dark and stay awake in the light, control the impulse to kill little sister, sit still for hours on end, do what he does not want to do without understanding why, look both ways when crossing the street, say please and thank you at the appropriate times, learn arithmetic and astronomy, physics and field hockey, how to dance and decorate the face, 1,000 other skills and subjects and survival techniques. And if you step back for a moment and watch, it is literally astounding all that must happen to brain and limb in just a few years. If that baby is going to join us, not destroy us, share in building a future for the whole human family, not drag us down into chaos and disaster. What will this child become indeed? Our very future, the future of those we hold most dear, depends upon what happens to the children. In the day of Elizabeth and Mary, Zechariah and Joseph, this was most obvious. Your children were an economic asset, both in your productive years on the land and in the day when you could no longer care for yourself. No pension plans to fall back on, no government to step in for neglected little ones. Admittedly, the tables have been turned. Today, children are an economic liability. Nevertheless, our future as families and human communities depends on what happens to them. They will grow up to drive us crazy or to gratify our deepest hopes and dreams. To burden society or build it. What will this child become? So what's the answer to the question? Only a certain kind of family can mature the infant savage into mature, responsible, contributing, caring human beings. Only family. Mary and Elizabeth, Joseph and Zechariah. The Christmas story is about the providential activity of God to bring hope and life to human history. But it's also about a God who does not act politically or magically, but always in and through those who, like Mary and Joseph, are submissive to his will, willing to be his servants and surrogates. I mean, listen to the songs that we're hearing this morning. What are they about? They're about God. And they're about a mother and a father and a child. Simple as that. The Christmas story, you see, insists that Jesus is an act of God, driving all history toward his goal. That's what those stars and those angel choirs and that talk of a virgin is all about. They're all saying, look here, something incredible is happening. At the same time, it's a rather modest and humble story. You know, there was a young fellow born about 300 years before Jesus who lived about the same number of years. In fact, his name was Alexander. Olympias, his mother, said that he was born out of the head of Zeus. Said she was penetrated by a thunderbolt so that fire gushed out of her womb. Not so this story, a simple story. By contrast, just a couple giving birth. Every pious Jewish mother, by the way, of faith still looks at her little one and says, maybe he will be the promised Messiah. Little children grow up to do God's work only as human beings see their presence as a number one responsibility. Now, when I say family, let me hasten to add that there are many kinds of family. The patriarchal families of traditional culture were large tribes of several generations. Did you ever wonder how Mary and Joseph could go for a whole day and not miss their son Jesus? Extended families of earlier rural life in this country, and now the nuclear family. But a family of faith, the faith that came in Jesus, is a particular kind of community. It means an intimate set of relationships characterized by unconditional affirmation of one another and accountability to one another. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse. If you don't get your homework done, Charlie, you don't get the car this weekend. John, I'm real upset. I need a little of your time. Edward, that picture was beautiful. Unconditional affirmation. 14-year-old tells what real family came to feel like to her. I read or heard somewhere that home is the place where you act the worst and are treated the best. Now I know what those words meant. I was cross all day to everybody. I snapped at my mother this morning. It was just awful to my brother. Tonight I left the kitchen for my sister to clean up, even though it was my turn. But when I got in, Mom had saved me a piece of pie. My brother offered to help me with my math. And when my dad got home late, he came in to see how I was feeling. Lying there, I felt looked after and above all, forgiven. It's just amazing how people I can treat so badly, who see my very worst side, still care. That's family. Unconditional embrace and never-ending accountability. Phyllis Laxton writes, while home on a break from medical school, my daughter was so busy she seldom sat down to eat a balanced meal. So using all the authority I could muster, I lectured her on the importance of good nutrition and ended my tirade with, the medical school should teach our future doctors the importance of a good diet. My daughter came over and gave me a big hug and said, they don't need to teach us. After all, we do have mothers. And they stay that way over the years. Have you noticed? Mothers. What will the child become? Loved and led, confident and responsible. It doesn't happen apart from family. No educational institution, no government program can make up for the lack of a Joseph and Mary. But family is under attack in our time, and elite culture out there tends to diminish the importance of marriage and family. John Leo, in a recent Newsweek, points to the relentless hostility unleashed by the 1960s counterculture which portrays traditional family and marriage as oppressive, patriarchal, outmoded, and destructive to kids. Note the lifestyle, if you will, of so many celebrities. But in fact, all the data are to the contrary. The traditional two-parent family means, on average, adults who are more productive and happy, who rear children with more physical and emotional well-being, who are also more productive and happy. But isn't it true that even our own lifestyle today tends to erode family life? I refer to the fact that our busy schedules, as parents, as grandparents even, tend to limit the time we have together to simply know and share. I received an email from a former member who now lives in North Carolina, telling of their family's experience recently, 6 days without any power during that ice storm you read about. She writes, "Winter camping in our home was, to say the least, challenging. We strategically placed candles throughout the house. I'm still cleaning up the wax. And we were lucky to have a gas fireplace in one bedroom that gave us one warm room where we all slept together. The rest of the house was in the 40s, laundry piled up, life slowed down, and an awful lot of Monopoly got played. As we drove home late one night from doing laundry at a friend's house where they had power, we saw lights near our turnoff and thought it might be a sign that we too now had power. I, of course, was very excited, but immediately the children started moaning, 'Oh no, oh no.' Turns out that they had preferred our life together without power." The Christmas story also says, at least implicitly, no family can do the job apart from a larger community of faith. Because there's no ideal family. Because every family suffers from the fragmentation of the modern world. Because the family often does come down to just mother and child. Because being and doing the job of family is not easy. It goes against the grain of the modern desire for self-fulfillment and autonomy. It's a demanding, tiring task, which is challenging. Maturing children is a painful, frustrating endeavor over years that requires an incredible amount of patience and worry and giving, more than we have at times. Sam Levinson once said, "Childhood is a time of rapid changes. Between the ages of 12 and 17, a parent can age 30 years. Or Robert Urban put it this way, "Sound travels very slowly. Sometimes the things you tell your children don't reach them until they're in their 40s. All I'm saying is there's nothing automatic or easy or even natural about the good family. Indeed, family can be a source of agony and hell as easily as a source of life and joy. The dysfunctional families become a byword of our times. Of course, what we overlook is the fact that most of the families we read about in the Bible are dysfunctional. Dysfunctional, but with a difference. They're all bound to a faith community which restrains and disciplines and encourages and shares the burden of bringing the next generation into being. Fear came over all the neighbors, and all these things were talked about through the entire hill country. And everybody asked the question, what will this child become? Marriage and family exist in virtually every known human society, but anthropologists know of no community that has long survived healthy and strong unless it has in its center a common faith and way of life. The family isolated, that is, without roots in a larger community of faith and values, is a family automatically at risk. Community of faith, all of us together, you and me, families and individuals, parents and grandparents, giving ourselves to our common hopes and futures, at the center of which is the child. Someone has said, our children are our gift to a future that we will never see. And indeed, the test of our own maturity in faith is whether we're able to see the child at the center of it all, where Jesus placed him, by the way. I know my family could not have done it alone. It was Mother and Father, along with and supported by a host of other faces that still hang there in the mists of memory, teachers and leaders and mentors and friends, heroes and models, all of whom enabled me to move from child to manhood. And it was in and through all of these that the hand of the Lord was with me. And it can be you that does that for the children of today, if you'll give a little time. You have no idea how important you can be to the next generation. After his father died, the great Southern novelist Walker Percy, at age 13, got to know, quite by accident, his 45-year-old Uncle Will, lawyer, war veteran, poet. Percy says that this marked a major turning point in his life, that he owes Uncle Will an unpayable debt. Physical education teacher received a letter from a former student. He wanted the teacher to know the impact he'd made on his life. Student told his teacher about the day in junior high, first day of class. The class had to run a 600-yard race, and the student didn't want to do it. After all, he always came in last, no matter how hard he ran. But this class turned out to be different, even though he again came in last. I remember you ran alongside of us, and you started yelling at me, "Good effort, Luke, good effort, absolutely magnificent." I felt like I'd won the Olympic gold medal for the marathon. Well, Lou became attached to this teacher over the years because he was the first person who ever took the time and interest to care. Next year he went out for soccer. I would have never had the courage to do it, he said, if it had not been for your example. That had been years ago. Lou told in his letter of how he went to college and studied journalism, even though one of the instructors told him he had no writing ability whatever. All through those 4 years, I held your example in my mind, Lou wrote, looking for possibilities and wondering how you managed to be so positive toward everybody all the time. He concluded his letter with this sentence: "Some time ago, I learned to know Jesus a little better and finally figured you out." Overbooked Inn, Shepherd and Strangers, Angels and Virgin, Star and Manger, wild, weird night, all sounds and sights to pierce the dull wherein we pass by, eternal come so very small, unnoticed by ordinary eye, a father and mother and the child she bore, one more birth, love come to earth. And what will the child become? You and I can help answer that question.